If increased taxes comes up, my answer will be unequivocally no. My approach to balancing the budget would be to cut and keep cutting. We should be priorities on public safety and public health, not much else. If it's a choice between asking citizens to hand over more of their hard-earned income or padding the town's budget, I'm going to keep cutting the budget. Simple, very simple as that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Beecham?
So our budget, as written and passed by town council, is balanced. Almost universally at year end, there's a surplus. One of the policies I've been trying to push for is what do we do with that surplus at the end of the year? We need a policy for how to deal with that surplus. Do we reduce debt? Do we put it in a pay-go fund for future capital expenditures? Do we put it in reserves for things we may find that catch us later? My philosophy with budgets is if you watch the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. I think as in any of your budgets, as in my budget, there are places we can cut and save in our town's budget. I think if we looked at a bottoms-up budget approach, we'll find some efficiencies, we'll find some savings. I think if we get employee involvement, they can probably identify where we might not be most effective with the spending of our dollars. I think we can benchmark what we're doing with other towns and learn from other towns our size and see if we can find some things that we can do to save some money. We need to analyze our reserves. We have a large amount of reserves on our balance sheet, and we just need to find out what the right amount for that is and what we should do with it. If we can establish utility rates that have our water and wastewater system pay for itself, that the general fund property tax budget won't have to subsidize the utilities. What I'm more concerned about is the long-term capital plan. Our wastewater plant is running 70 to 75% of capacity now. At some point, we're gonna have to spend some big money to upgrade that. Our elevated water storage tanks, we're under capacity on that. We're gonna need to change. I would not advocate raising the tax rate above the constant yield. As a matter of fact, the constant yield for this coming year is 41 cents. We're taxed at 38. We need to find a way to stay at 38 cents for the forthcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just take a moment. The constant yield tax rate is basically the tax rate that a jurisdiction would have to impose in order to bring in the same revenue in the current year as they did the last year. And quite frankly, I think that's the wrong way of looking at balancing a budget. It's the wrong way to look at creating any type of thriving environment. We have to look at from the bottom up. Where are we now? What do we have that's working? What isn't working? Let's be frank with ourselves, and let's invest in those things that aren't working, and let's look at cutting back on those things that do not work or are no longer necessary. It reeks of federal government when we look at last year's budget to try to determine next year's budget. That's really not how you look at your budget. You don't look at last year. You look at, do I have the same job? Is my income the same? Are my investments returning the same? And then you develop your budget based on that. Not based on, well, last year we had a good year, so I'm certain this year we will have a great year, and if not, what do we do? Well, in the government's case, they shake down the residents. And you and I don't have that luxury in our personal budgets. I don't think that our local government should have that propensity either. But it all circles back to one thing: having enough revenue to do what we need to do. And that winds up in the lap of creating a business environment that people want to come, invest their life savings in the streets of Centreville, open up a business, and begin to thrive. It all circles back to what are we going to do to create a business environment where the commercial tax base is where it should be, and the relief on the citizens will finally come.
Okay, thank you.
Taxation is an interesting thing, and you really need to understand what taxation does. It takes money out of the pockets of consumers. It lowers your ability to purchase goods and services and things. So raising taxes is really a bad thing when you look at it in that respect. And some will tell you, okay, this is taking money out of the pockets of the citizen and putting it in the pockets of government so the government can spend it. And I can tell you as an economist that the marginal increase in tax rate never equals the marginal increase in tax revenue. In fact, in some cases, it's actually negative, as Governor O'Malley found out about 4 or 5 years ago when he raised that huge tax increase on us. Anyway, we need to look at waste. We need to look at areas of our budget where money can be saved, either through the bid system. And one thing that I suggested to the Parks Board when I attended one of their meetings is that they tighten up their bids in such a way that they would get the best value for their dollar. Not necessarily the cheapest price, because that doesn't always give you what you want and what you're looking for in a vendor. But where are we going to get the best value for our dollar, and where can we stretch our dollar farther? When I was, well, in my 4 years at the Horse Council, I was responsible not only for the budgets, but I was also responsible for their spending and keeping their spending in check. And I'm proud to say that I effectively doubled their treasury in my 4 years there. Through careful spending, watching what the other officers spent, and making sure every single dollar we had counted. And that's what I would intend to do at the town of Centreville.